Coach benches hijab-wearing player. She joins rival team and scores winning goal in 90 seconds. The words hit Layla Karim like a physical blow, colder and sharper than the liniment-laced air of the locker room. The hijab comes off, or you don't play. Coach Evans didn't shout. He never did. His power was in the quiet, absolute finality of his voice. A voice that could dissect a player's confidence with surgical precision from 50 yards away. He stood with his arms crossed over a polo shirt stretched tight across his chest, his face a mask of granite resolve. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the state championship trophy gleaming under the fluorescent lights on the far side of the room, as if it were an idol demanding a sacrifice. Her sacrifice. The room, buzzing seconds before with the nervous energy of 30 teenage girls about to play the biggest game of their lives, fell into a deep, ringing silence. Every girl on the Edison High Eagles soccer team stopped what she was doing. Tying cleats, stretching hamstrings, adjusting shin guards. It all ceased. The only sound was the low hum of the ventilation system and the frantic thumping of Layla's own heart. She felt her hand instinctively go to her head, her fingers tracing the familiar, soft edge of her performance wear hijab. It was a sleek, black athletic fabric, designed for this very purpose, breathable and secure. It was no different from a goalkeeper's cap or a defender's headband. It was a part of her uniform, a part of her. She'd worn it for every practice, every game. For the 3 years she'd been the team's star midfielder. The playmaker, the one they called the Ghost, because of how she'd appear out of nowhere to steal the ball and set up a goal. Coach, Layla began, her voice barely a whisper, yet it felt like a scream in the suffocating quiet. We've been over this. The league approved it years ago. It's never been an issue. It's an issue today, Evans said, finally turning his gaze on her. His eyes were pale blue, like chips of ice. This is the championship. We are one team, one uniform, no exceptions, no distractions. The word hung in the air. Distractions. It was a label he'd never used before, but it landed with the weight of an anvil. She wasn't a player to him in this moment. She was a problem to be solved. Her eyes darted around the room, pleading. She saw her best friend Maya, staring at the floor, suddenly fascinated by the scuff marks on her own cleats. She saw Sarah, the coach's daughter and the team captain, looking away, her jaw tight. No one would meet her gaze. These were the girls she'd bled with, celebrated with, cried with. They were a family, or so she thought. Now, they were just bystanders at her execution. The power dynamic in the room had shifted, coalescing into a single point of pressure aimed directly at her. The fabric of her hijab felt both like a shield and a target. It was the physical manifestation of her faith, her identity, her connection to her family and her heritage. To take it off in this room, under these lights, under his command, it would be more than just removing a piece of cloth. It would be a surrender of her very soul. I can't do that, Coach, Layla said, her voice finding a sliver of strength. It trembled, but it did not break. Evans nodded slowly, a grim, self-satisfied smile touching the corner of his lips. It wasn't a smile of warmth, but of confirmation. He had expected this. He had wanted this. I know you can't, he said, his voice dropping to an almost conversational tone, which was somehow more chilling. That's why you'll be on the bench. End of discussion. Get yourselves on the field. Ladies, warm-ups in 2. He turned and walked out, leaving a crater of silence in his wake. For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if a spell was broken, the girls began to file out, their movements stiff and unnatural. They wouldn't look at her. They couldn't. Their silence was a verdict. It screamed that the team was more important than one player, that the dream of the trophy on the other side of the wall was worth her humiliation. Maya was the last to leave. She paused at the door, her back to Layla. I'm sorry, Lay, she whispered, her voice thick with a guilt that was useless to Layla now. Then, she was gone. Layla sank onto the bench, the hardwood cold against her legs. The vibrant, living dream of the championship, the roar of the crowd, the feel of the ball at her feet, the sweet taste of victory crumbled into gray ash. She was alone, a ghost in her own locker room, stripped not of her hijab, but of her team, her purpose, her place in the world. The fluorescent lights hummed, indifferent. The gleaming trophy might as well have been a million miles away. The humiliation wasn't just that she was benched. It was that it was public. Evans made sure of it. When the teams lined up on the field for the national anthem, the announcer's voice boomed over the stadium's PA system. And now, the starting lineup for your Edison High Eagles. One by one, the names were called, and the girls would jog forward, waving to the roaring crowd. Layla's heart ached with every name. That should be her. That was her. Then came the sucker punch. On the bench for the Eagles, the announcer continued, "Number 10, Layla Karim." A confused murmur rippled through the home team bleachers. Number 10, their star midfielder, on the bench. For the championship game, the stadium camera, broadcasting on the Jumbotron, panned to the Eagles bench. Evans had made her sit at the far end, isolated from the other reserve players, a solitary figure in her warm-up jacket. There, on a screen 50 feet high, was her face. Her hijab was starkly visible. The crowd saw her. The rival team, the Northwood Ravens, saw her. Her family, somewhere in those stands, saw her. She could feel thousands of pairs of eyes on her, feel their confusion, their pity. She wanted to shrink, to disappear, but the giant screen held her captive. She forced herself to sit straight, to keep her expression neutral, but inside, she was imploding. The world had become a stage, and she was the unwilling star of a drama she hadn't written. Coach Evans stood a few feet away, his arms crossed, watching the field, a silent, smug general surveying his battlefield. He had made his point. Uniformity, control. His authority was absolute. The message was clear: no one is bigger than the team, and he was the team. The whistle blew, the game began. It was a nightmare. Without Layla controlling the midfield, the Eagles were a ship without a rudder. Passes went astray. The rhythm was gone. The Ravens, a disciplined and aggressive team, exploited the gaping hole in the center of the field. They pressed hard, their offense flowing like water into the cracks of the Eagles' defense. Layla watched, her hands clenched into fists inside her pockets. She could see the plays before they happened. She knew where the ball was going, which player was about to be caught out of position. She would find herself half-freezing from the bench, a shout on her lips to warn a teammate, only to clamp her mouth shut and sit back down. The bitter taste of helplessness in her throat. Her body was screaming to play, every muscle twitching. With phantom movements, the first goal for the Ravens came at 20 minutes. A defensive lapse that Layla would have been there to cover. The second came just before halftime. A brutal counterattack that sliced through the heart of the Eagles' formation. The halftime whistle was a mercy. The Eagles trudged off the field, their heads down, a 2-0 deficit hanging over them like a shroud. The energy had been sucked out of the stadium. The roaring crowd was now a nervous, murmuring mob. As her teammates filed past her into the locker room, avoiding her eyes, as if her very presence was a curse, Layla couldn't follow them. She couldn't bear the suffocating silence, the unspoken accusations. She turned and walked in the opposite direction, down the concrete tunnel that led deep beneath the stadium. The air grew cool and damp. The roar of the crowd faded to a distant hum. The only sounds were the echo of her own footsteps and the drip-drip-up of condensation from an overhead pipe. She found a small alcove, a dark space filled with discarded tackling dummies and old equipment, and slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cold, gritty floor. And then, the dam broke. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. It wasn't just about the game. It was about the betrayal, the years of dedication, the skipped parties, the early morning practices. The bond she thought she had with her team, all of it, felt like a lie. Evans hadn't just benched her. He had erased her. He had taken her passion and twisted it into a liability. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Then it buzzed again. And again, a relentless, angry vibration. She pulled it out, her vision blurred by tears. The screen was a cascade of notifications, texts, social media alerts, missed calls. She clicked on one. It was a link to a Twitter video. Her hand shaking, she pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed from inside the locker room. It captured the whole exchange. Evans's cold ultimatum, her quiet, firm refusal, the crushing silence of her teammates. The raw, unfiltered cruelty of the moment was undeniable. The tweet above it was simple. This is what hate looks like. Edison High School, you should be ashamed. Hashtag let Layla. Hashtag, it was trending. Not just in their city, nationally. She scrolled, her breath catching in her throat. The video had exploded. It had tens of thousands of retweets, then hundreds of thousands. It was being shared by local news anchors, by sports journalists, by celebrities. There was a comment from a famous pro soccer player. Talent is talent. Character is character. This coach has neither. Stay strong, kid. A world-famous Muslim Olympian, a fencer who had competed in her own hijab, had shared it with the caption, "We see you. We stand with you. Your crown is your hijab, and they can't take it from you. The whole world, it seemed, was rushing to her defense. The silence of her locker room had been answered by a global roar. It was overwhelming, a tidal wave of support that was both terrifying and validating. Someone had seen her. Someone had stood up for her when no one else would. A shadow fell over her. She looked up, startled, and saw her father, Amir, standing there. His face was a mixture of pride and profound sadness. He held out his hand. "I thought I might find you here," he said, his voice a warm, steady anchor in her storm. She took his hand, and he pulled her to her feet, wrapping her in a hug. She buried her face in his jacket, the tears starting anew. But this time they were different. They were a release. "They hate me," she sobbed. "No, Habibti," he said, stroking her hair over her hijab. "They don't hate you. He fears you. There is a difference." He held her at arm's length, and looked into her eyes. "What he did in there was wrong, but that is his burden to carry, not yours. Your worth is not determined by his approval. It is not determined by a trophy or a jersey. It is forged in here." He tapped his finger gently on her heart. "Do you understand?" Layla nodded, wiping her eyes. The tears had stopped. The shivering in her soul had quieted. In its place, something new was taking root. A cold, hard resolve. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving Evans wrong. It was about honoring the girl who had said no in that locker room. It was about honoring the millions of people, strangers, who were now shouting her name. Her phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. "This is Coach Isabella Rossi from the Northwood Ravens. I saw the video. What your coach did is a disgrace. There's an old, obscure league bylaw for extreme circumstances that allows for a mid-season roster change. No one's ever used it for a championship game. It's insane. But I'm about to." A second text came through. "If you want it, there is a place for you on my team." Right now Layla stared at the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Join the rival team, in the middle of the championship game. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. And it was the only path forward. She looked up at her father, a flicker of fire in her eyes. "Baba," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I think I need to play soccer." The second half was already 5 minutes old, when Coach Izzy Rossi of the Northwood Ravens strode across the midfield line, right to the officials' table. The referee blew his whistle, stopping play. The entire stadium, already on edge, fell silent. Coach Rossi was everything Coach Evans was not. She was young, energetic, with a fiery intensity that was focused on passion, not control. She wore her hair in a tight ponytail, and her eyes missed nothing. "I'm invoking Bylaw 17. Section 4, she announced, her voice ringing with authority. "Emergency player registration due to violation of the league's code of conduct by an opposing coach." The head official, a portly man named Henderson, looked like he'd swallowed a bug. "Coach, you can't be serious. That rule is for season-long harassment, not a benching." The player was benched for discriminatory reasons, directly violating the league's diversity and inclusion mandate. Rossi shot back, holding up her phone, where the viral video was playing. "The evidence is currently being viewed by about 2 million people, including, I'm sure, the league commissioner. Are you going to be the official who stands in the way of rectifying that injustice?" On camera, Henderson paled. He looked over at the Eagles bench, where Coach Evans was now standing, his face purple with rage. He looked at the Jumbotron, where the camera was now trained on this bizarre midfield drama. He looked at Rossi's unwavering, defiant stare. "The paperwork," he stammered. "It would take hours." "Already filed electronically," Rossi said, with a predatory grin. "Sent it to the league office 10 minutes ago. I just got the confirmation email. She's eligible." A gasp went through the crowd, as the implication of her words sank in. Rossi turned and walked, with purpose, directly toward the Edison High bench. She walked past the stunned reserve players, past the apoplectic Coach Evans, and stopped directly in front of Layla. The stadium was so quiet you could hear the snap of the stadium flags in the wind. This was the moment, the visual that would be screenshotted, GIFed, and replayed for years to come. Rossi knelt down, so she was at eye level with Layla. "Forget what team you were on," she said, her voice low but intense. "Forget what he said. Forget the score. Right now, there is only one thing that matters. Do you want to play soccer?" Layla looked past her, at the faces of her former teammates. They were frozen, watching in disbelief. She saw Maya, her face streaked with tears. She saw Sarah Evans, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Coach Evans, who was mouthing the word traitor at her. The word should have hurt. It didn't. It was meaningless. He had betrayed her first. He had betrayed the game. Layla met Coach Rossi's gaze and gave a single firm nod. Rossi smiled. It was a genuine, brilliant smile. She reached into the bag slung over her shoulder and pulled out a jersey. It was the deep crimson and black of the Northwood Ravens. Number 10. Welcome to the Ravens, Rossi said. Her voice loud enough for the sideline microphone to pick it up. In a move of pure, unadulterated theater, she didn't ask Layla to change. She simply pulled the Ravens jersey over Layla's head, right on top of her Eagles warm-up jacket. A crimson banner of defiance over a blue background of betrayal. The stadium erupted. It wasn't a cheer for one team or the other. It was a roar of pure, cathartic emotion. It was the sound of a story reaching its climax. The home crowd, the Edison fans, were cheering for their benched star, even if she was now wearing the enemy's colors. The Ravens fans were cheering for their audacious coach and their new secret weapon. It was a moment of transcendence, where loyalty to a school was eclipsed by loyalty to a principle. Layla stood up. The unfamiliar crimson jersey, feeling strangely right. She did a few quick stretches, the adrenaline singing in her veins. The world had narrowed to the 100 yards of green grass in front of her. The referee, looking flustered but defeated, officially subbed her into the game. As she ran onto the field, her former teammates stared at her, their expressions a cocktail of shock, guilt, and awe. She was no longer Layla, their friend. She was number 10 for the Northwood Ravens. And she was playing against them. The score was still 2-0. The clock showed 10 minutes remaining. Layla's impact was immediate. It was like a key turning in a lock. She brought order to the chaos of the Ravens' midfield, distributing the ball with a preternatural calm and vision. She was a ghost again, but this time in crimson. With 5 minutes left, she stole a pass from the Eagles' captain, Sarah Evans, who stumbled in surprise. Layla launched a perfect through ball to the Ravens' star striker, who blasted it into the back of the net. 2-1. The comeback was on. The Eagles were rattled. They were playing against the very player who had been the architect of their entire season. They knew her moves, her tendencies, but knowing them and stopping them were two different things. Coach Evans was screaming from the sideline, his face a mask of fury, but his words were lost in the noise and confusion. His team was broken. He had broken them. The clock ticked down. 2 minutes, 90 seconds. 1 minute. The Eagles' defense, desperate to hold on, cleared the ball deep into their own territory. A Ravens defender intercepted it and passed it to Layla, who was just inside her own half. This was it. She saw the field not as a collection of players, but as a grid of possibilities, a flowchart of movements. She saw the exhaustion in the Eagles' defenders, the panic in their eyes, and she saw a single fleeting lane open up. She began to run. She sidestepped one defender, a girl she'd mentored just last season. She used a burst of speed to get past another. She was in open field. The only person between her and the goal was Sarah Evans. Sarah, the coach's daughter. The girl who had stood by and done nothing. As Layla approached, she saw a flicker of something in Sarah's eyes. Not just rivalry. Not just panic. Resignation. Layla performed the move she was famous for. A move Coach Evans himself had taught her. A dazzling, intricate piece of footwork called the Viper's Kiss. She faked left, planted her foot, and cut right, leaving Sarah stumbling in her wake. Now it was just her and the goalkeeper. The world seemed to slow down. She could hear her own breathing. She could see the desperate look on the goalie's face. She didn't aim for power. She aimed for precision. A calm, calculated shot to the bottom left corner, just beyond the goalie's outstretched fingers. The ball rolled across the grass. It kissed the inside of the post and settled into the back of the net. Silence, then. An explosion. The entire stadium, both sides, erupted in a single, unified roar. 2-2. The game was tied. The whistle blew for full time before the ball was even brought back to midfield. The game would go into overtime, but the story was already written. Layla was mobbed by her new Ravens teammates, lifted onto their shoulders, a hero in a stolen jersey. Across the field, Coach Evans stood alone, a statue of impotent rage. His players were on their knees, not just from exhaustion, but from the emotional wreckage of the past hour. He had tried to make an example of Layla. Instead, he had made her a legend. The fallout was swift and brutal. Before the overtime period could even begin, the school superintendent and the head of the athletic board were on the field. striding towards the Eagles bench. The conversation was short and not bittersweet. Coach Evans was escorted off the field, his career not just over, but incinerated, on the altar of his own hubris. The video, the crowd, the sheer undeniable injustice of it all, had left the administration with no other choice. Brand deals vanished. The local car dealership that sponsored the team's scoreboard pulled its funding mid-game. The sporting goods company that supplied their uniforms issued a statement condemning his actions and terminating their contract with the school, effective immediately. His legacy as a winning coach was erased, replaced by a single, indelible image, his furious face as Layla, wearing a rival's jersey, defeated him. Layla, meanwhile, was being hailed as a hero, but it wasn't the fawning, artificial praise of a media cycle. It was organic, it was respect. Girls from her old team, the Eagles, came over one by one during the break. Maya was first, hugging her tightly, sobbing apologies. "I was a coward," she wept. "I'm so sorry, Layla." Even Sarah Evans came over. Her face was pale. "What my dad did," she started, her voice cracking. "It wasn't about the hijab, not really. This was the twist. The one that reframed everything." "Then what was it about?" Layla asked, her voice quiet. Sarah took a deep breath. "Your dad and mine. They were best friends. A long time ago. They started a business together. A tech company. It failed. My dad lost everything. He's always blamed your father. He said your dad cheated him, ran the company into the ground, and walked away clean." Layla was stunned. Her father had never mentioned this. "He saw you," Sarah continued, "succeeding, being celebrated, and he couldn't stand it. It was like your family was getting a victory he thought he was owed. Benching you was his way of taking something back from your dad. It was petty. It was cruel. And it was all a lie." "A lie?" Sarah pulled out her phone and showed Layla a series of scanned documents she'd found in her father's old desk. Legal papers, bank statements, an old, signed affidavit. "I found this last year," Sarah whispered. "The company failed because of a bad investment my dad made against your father's advice. A huge, illegal gamble. Your dad, Amir. He didn't just walk away. He took the blame. He used his own savings to pay off the debts to protect my dad from being charged with fraud. He saved my father from prison, and in return, my dad let him believe he was a traitor for 20 years. The puzzle pieces of Layla's life clicked into a new, heartbreaking picture. Her family's quiet financial struggles. Her father's unwavering insistence on integrity above all else. His quiet sadness whenever the Evans name came up. He had been carrying this burden, this silent sacrifice, for 2 decades. And then, the final piece. The source of the viral video. "It was you," Layla breathed, looking at Sarah. "You filmed it. You leaked it." Sarah nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "It was the only way. I couldn't let him do to you what he did to your dad. It was my turn to break the silence." Suddenly, a choice that had seemed black and white became a universe of gray. Before the game, as the viral wave was cresting, the school district's lawyers had called her father. They had made an offer. A 6-figure settlement. Enough money to solve every financial problem they had ever had, to send her to any college she wanted. All they had to do was sign a non-disclosure agreement. To be silent. To let the story die. Her father had presented the choice to her. "This is your life, Layla. Your story. You can take this, and we can be secure. No one would blame you. Or, you can fight." It was the ultimate moral dilemma. The wrong but tempting path. The easy way out. She could have taken the money, a quiet justice in the form of cash. But looking at Sarah, at the sacrifice she had made, at the truth she had unearthed, Layla knew she had made the right choice. She had refused the settlement. She chose to fight, not with lawyers, but on the field. The game went to penalty kicks. Layla, as the newest member of the Ravens, was chosen to take the 5th and final shot. The championship rested on her foot. She placed the ball on the spot. She looked at the Eagles goalie, a girl she had trained with for years. She looked at the stands, where her father was watching, his face a portrait of unbearable pride. She looked at the bench, where Sarah was now sitting. Her ordeal over. She took a deep breath, the black fabric of her hijab a familiar comfort. She wasn't just kicking for a trophy anymore. She was kicking for her father's honor. For Sarah's courage. For every person who had ever been told they were a distraction. She struck the ball. It flew, straight and true, into the top corner of the net. The Ravens were state champions. Later, in the chaos of the celebration, her father found her. He simply held her, his own tears finally falling. The truth about his past with Evans was now out, confirmed by Sarah. The story was no longer just about a benched player. It was a deep, searing family drama of betrayal and redemption. Evans was ruined. But Layla's father, Amir Karim, was finally free. His name was cleared, his integrity restored in the most public way imaginable. As Layla stood there, soaked in Gatorade, a championship medal around her neck, wearing a rival's jersey over her old team's colors, she understood. Cruelty always collects its debt, and integrity. That's the only currency that matters. Where are you reading this from? Drop your city, your state, your country. Let's see how far this story travels. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next justice twist.